Oh, I've been set free. I've been redeemed by the greatest love.
We're going to take part in communion, and you know, some places have called it the Lord's Supper, and I guess that's all right. I like communion better because the word communion comes from the Latin word communos, meaning with oneness. With oneness, we take the bread of Christ, we take the body of Christ, and we each bring it into ourselves, and it's a representation of what has been done. The Passover meal was taken the first time when they were in slavery to Egypt, if you remember, and they were to put the blood on the doorpost, and they were to make an unleavened bread. And God was very specific in Exodus 12 about how He wanted that bread to be made. It couldn't have any leaven in it. Leaven represents sin generally in the Bible. It had to be pierced with holes and striped. In fact, even today, rabbis don't understand the significance of why the bread has to be done in a very specific manner. But us with New Covenant eyes, we see, we proclaim the goodness of it. And here's a kind of a picture of what the matzah is. And it's so specific that if you go into the aisles and you're looking for it, some of them will say, not for Passover use. Because God is very specific, and they're still very specific of what it must look like and what it must be. So the bread is striped, pierced, and without leaven. Jesus, on that night He was betrayed, did the same memorial meal that the Jewish nation had done for 1,500 years plus. That Last Supper, as the Da Vinci picture would show it. He was bringing His disciples in and having that Passover Seder meal with them. They did it to remember the deliverance from slavery, being enslaved to Egypt and then ultimately being brought into the Promised Land. But you know what? We have a different take on it now. Hebrews 8 says that now Jesus, our high priest, has been given a ministry that is far superior to the old priesthood, for He is the one who mediates for us a far better covenant with God based on better promises. And we proclaim with these same things the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Christ. And our inclusion, see, this is where a lot of times we miss it, our inclusion in that death, burial, and resurrection, our co-crucifixion, as we sometimes will call it. Today we can proclaim that we were once slaves in bondage, but now slaves to freedom. Look at what Romans says in Romans 6:17. Thanks be to God that you were once slaves of sin, have become obedient from the heart to the standard of teaching to which you were committed. And having been set free, past tense, from sin, you become slaves to righteousness. And I love what it said prior to this verse. It says, for one who has died, and He's talking about each and every one of us, who has died, has been set free from sin. Now, if we've died with Christ, we believe we also live with Him. Notice that will is in parentheses or in italics. It's not part of the original manuscript. We also live with Him. I love what the Mirror says, Mirror paraphrase for that verse. And it says, faith sees us joined in His death and alive with Him in His resurrection. Let me repeat that, guys. Look up here. Faith sees us joined in His death, joined together in His death, and alive with Him in His resurrection. We've had an easier time a lot of times rightly dividing what the blood means, what the wine is for the forgiveness of sins. That makes sense to us. We've been hit over and over and over again about the blood of Christ and that we need to have the forgiveness of sins. But so many times we're not rightly discerning what the bread means. And you see it in 1 Corinthians 11 where he says, you guys don't rightly discern the body. We don't rightly understand what the body means in this communion. 1 Corinthians tells us to discern what the body of Christ, so that we know what the bread represents, that the broken body. But what does it mean to us to rightly discern the body? Have you ever thought about that? We put so much focus, I think, a lot of times on the blood and on the wine that we'll take or on the juice that we'll take. But we've missed the point of what the body itself means. Where is Jesus? That would be the question I'd have you guys each ask individually in your own heart right now. Because what we've been thought and taught is Jesus is so far away. But we don't rightly discern the body. When we even say it, a lot of times we got the understanding that we're the body of Christ, but we don't understand that He's come to live inside us, to be our very life, the mystery of the gospel. So if Jesus lives inside us, and we're not rightly discerning the body, then there is mistakes making. And we're walking in deceit. And I don't want any of us to walk in deceit. I want all of us to walk in the fullness of what His life means in each and every one of us. So is Jesus living inside us? That's the mystery of the gospel. Therefore then, is Jesus sad? No. You can answer out loud on this one.
No.
Is Jesus anxious?
No.
Is Jesus full of fear?
No.
Is He sick?
No.
Rightly discern the body of Christ in you. You've been joined to the Lord, 1 Corinthians 6 says. You're one spirit. We are, and you see this in 1 Corinthians 12, we say it all the time, we're not rightly understanding who we are. We are the body of Christ. Each of us are, and each of us individually, members of it, make up this body. I love this last verse, and I'll leave it on this as Craig and Billy, if you'll grab the implements for communion and start passing them out. And if you are part of the body of Christ, feel free to take care. We don't even have a membership, so you don't have to be a member here to take it. If you're a member of the body of Christ, take communion with us. It's with oneness that we eat this bread and proclaim the fullness of Christ, the death, the burial, and resurrection of Christ. And this is the mystery that God has chosen to make known among the Gentiles, the glorious riches of this mystery, which is Christ in me, Christ in Linda, Christ in Billy, Christ in you, the hope of glory.
Greatest love, oh, I've been set free. I've been